next or today's next class itself that, okay, from this class itself that why are we studying and at which phase are we currently in. So in this way, it will be easier for us to understand the purpose of each of the phase and then move on and accordingly move on with it. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, so the first step that is written in the whole diagram, as you can see, is identifying the gap. So with that word itself, can any of you explain what did you understand? Which gap are we talking about? This is in reference to the literature review, the last class. Yashwati?
Yes.
So when we say identifying the gap in reference to literature review and the first phase of psychometric tool development, what do you think the gap would be? Or what does it mean when we are identifying the gap?
It means the limitations of the last literature, or the for we can work on those limitations which the previous research has left on, or
Right.
we can, yes ma'am.
Thank you. So, for example, in the last class we had discussed about something called quarter life crisis, which is an upcoming phenomena which is seen around the young adult population, that is 20 to 35 years old. So, just like midlife crisis, individuals, young adults who are aged 25 to 35, sorry, 20 to 35 years old, do experience these identity crisis. So that's why it's called as quarter life crisis. But in order to study in depth or in order to conduct further research on what are the symptoms that are seen or what is the identity development process, all of that, we need a tool that will measure the construct, that will measure the latent variable. So in this aspect, when we go through the literature review, we will understand that there are no existing tool which can be used to measure this construct. So that is where we have identified the gap. Similarly, even in the phase of clinical, for the purpose of clinical, if I have a doubt that the client that is sitting right in front of me is he or she going through the symptoms or the phases of quarter life crisis, then again I would if there was a tool in my hand, then it would give me on which of the domains is the individual standing, at which phase is he standing. At the same time, it will also help me with the direction to which are the symptoms that the individual is currently feeling. So all of these things can be understood and mapped with the help of a psychometric tool. So identifying the gap is that you are identifying that there is no existence of a certain tool, and even if it is there, then it is not standardized or the norms are not developed according to the population, the client's population that we have, especially in India, where we have multicultural issues and multicultural beliefs that contribute to the identity of an individual. A lot of tools that are developed in America or US or the Western society will be more focusing on the individualistic culture, while Indian culture focuses on the collectivistic culture. So here, while using tools that are made from Western society, there might be a lot of issues in the interpretation of the scores. So identifying the gap. So similarly, if when I said quarter life crisis, our individual who is Indian will have an additional thing that is added to it, that is changes in his religious or spiritual belief system, which are very different from the Western society. So this is one domain that can be added in a tool that is developed for the Indian population. So like that, when we are looking at the items that are already there in an existing tools, we will realize that sometimes the tools that are developed in a Western society, from a Western cultural point of view, will not be suitable for a client population from Indian culture. So these are all the gaps that we are identifying, and that is where we decide that there is a need for a tool. So after identifying the gap and identifying the reasons why there is a need for a tool, then the second phase, as you can see, is set theoretical foundation. So this is where the literature review second part begins, where you are creating or establishing a foundation, theoretical foundation. So when I told you the quarter life crisis, then what are the existing theories on it? So there are few 2 to 3 theories, because it's such a evolving topic phenomena. There will be 2 to 3 theories, and based on those theories, I can find the domains or the domains for my tool. Similarly, if I'm saying identity crisis, so in which aspect and how it works in family, in career, what are the reasons why a individual is going through the quarter life crisis? So by establishing a theoretical foundation, I get to have a basic concept or idea from which I can work, from which I can manipulate and create, construct the items. So once that I found the theoretical foundation, I have the background information on what my variable is and how can I construct items from it. So the third phase is in the setting the purpose of the instrument. Okay, now that I know what is my topic and how I can create the item, the next question that that arises is, what is the whole purpose of creating the tool itself? So who is my target population on whom I'll be administering, and what is the whole purpose? Is it the research only, or is it client? If it is if it is for clinical purpose, or if it is for educational purpose, or is it for organizational? So when it is organizational, it is selection. When it is clinical, it is more diagnostic and classification. Like that, when I set the purpose of my tool, or for which purpose should this tool be used, similarly my items, my response format, everything will be on the basis of the purpose that I choose on. So that is why right from the beginning, setting the purpose is very important, because on the basis of that purpose and the theoretical foundation will my items arise from. The next one is select the construct attributes, that is the characteristics. So when I say quarter life identity crisis, then what are the phases of that identity crisis? What are the areas?
Hello, you're not audible.
Am I not audible to everyone?
Yeah. Just few minutes back, you are not audible. Okay. Now you are audible.
Okay. Should I, could you all hear the set the purpose stage?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the next one is selecting construct attributes. That is the construct that I've chosen, identity crisis, quarter life identity crisis. What are the characteristics of it? So which all aspect of life is being affected? What are the phases of the development of the quarter life crisis? So like that, all the characteristics, all the constructs attributes will be selected. The next is overall planning. So in this overall planning, these are the questions that you need to ask. So questions during the planning of scale development. First one is, how many items are necessary? So according to various researches that exist, minimum, you can find a variety of items. So right from brief items where there are only 5 items existing, from 10, 15, 30, and more than that. According to previous researchers, the ideal item number is 30. But the more the item number increases, the more the reliable and valid it will be. This is what is told according to previous researchers. But at the same time, there is a risk of having the client experience fatigue if there are tools that have 100 to 150 items that measure the same construct. So the first question is, how many items are necessary? So as a psychometrician, it is your decision on how many you think is necessary. And it will also be on the basis, your decision will be based on the item analysis and all the further phases that come next. The second is which response scale is appropriate. So will it be Likert, will it be Gutman, will it be Thurston? All of this is based on the purpose. So that is why we are setting the purpose of the test right before we are starting with the planning stage, because which response scale is appropriate will be depending on our purpose. The second is how to score the test. Will it be qualitative? Will it be quantitative? Even if that, will it be in rating scale format? Like that, there are multiple, which all of this will be going in depth in further classes. The next is which psychometric model is appropriate. So IRT, CTT, generalizability theory, all of that, which will be covered again. Fifth one is what item evaluation process is suitable. Again, that will be covered in next classes. So even the basic characteristics of item evaluation will be shown further in the diagram format. And sixth is how to administer the test. What are the instructions? What are the test settings? What are the environment that should be considered? And what are the characteristics of the examiner administrator that you're looking forward to? All of that should be decided. So after the overall planning, so after going through all of these phases, do we begin with first thing, generating the first item pool? So I hope everyone knows what item is. So when I say item is the first question or first stem and everything, it will be covered in the terminology next one. But basically when you say item is when you're looking at the questionnaire, each question or the statement that we see is called upon as item. So after all of this process, the next is generating the initial item pool. So item pool is necessary when it is necessary to have an abundance item generated in that pool. So because from 100 and 150 or 200, 300 items do we come and analyze and come to or however we desire to. So next is setting the test specification. So that is format specification. So even when I'm considering the tool or the item, so for example, how have you been, from depression scale, how have you been feeling from past 1 week? So in that too, the question format or the test format can be short answer, essay answer, or it can be oral exam, or it can be multiple choice. So like that, the setting the test specification is the next thing after item pool generation. Actually, it is not this next thing, it has to be done parallelly because the question or the item that you're generating will also be dependent on what kind of test format will you be looking for. Next, after you have generated the item pool and set the test specification, the next process is setting the administration procedure. So what I had mentioned before is the environment or the instrument, or what are the test materials that we'll be using, which stimuli will be exposed to the subject beforehand or which will not be. And all of this are the setting the administration procedure. Next is the expert review pool items. So this is a very important stage where not only from you as a psychometrician, you do have a kind of subject expert, you are a subject expert, but it is necessary to have a third person point of view who is an expert in the construct that we are studying, in the construct for which we are developing the tool. So this is where expert review is necessary. We will be sending our generated item pool to the expert review for the expert review, and the expert will review and analyze which are the items that are fully able to capture the construct, which are not, which are confusing and trying to actually mimic or distract from the construct that we are measuring. All of these things will be looked from the expert point of view, and that way we can modify the questions already existing items within our pool or eliminate depending on the expert review. So after the subject matter experts review the pool items, next we have revising the pool 1. So after we get the overall feedback, this is often done in terms of, again, rating scales where we are giving multiple subject matter experts the same tool and ask them to rate on the basis of how much do you think this question is able to elicit response, which is measuring the construct variable. So here, the one rater might give 5, the other rater might give 4. So based on this, you have to do the inter-rater reliability and look for which revising the pool 1 fully is focused on modifying, eliminating, and coming with a more concentrated pool of items. Once you have found, so from 100 and 150, I have reached to a pool of items which is consisting of 50 items. So next step will be pilot testing this. So this population will be minimum needs to be 100, and in the pilot minimum it can be ranging from 30 to 100, but the more appropriate population, pilot testing population, sample population is 100 according to researchers. So in that you will be administering all the items which are put in an appropriate test format as a form of a questionnaire or a scale, and it will be administered on a sample population as a pilot test. So after the pilot test, we'll end up doing the item analysis. That is where we get to know a lot of information about how each item is performing in the tool and its relationship with the construct that we are measuring. So we'll do item difficulty, item discrimination, a lot of item total correlation, like that. A lot of analysis will be going through to again see which are the items that are successfully able to differentiate between high performers or low performer, or able to correctly capture the construct that we are measuring. The next is after that, after we have completed item analysis of the item pool, from 50, I might end up with 30. So by reducing the number of items, when I'm reducing the number of items also, I am doing that on the basis that by reducing the number of items in my tool, I am able to establish more reliable and more valid tool. So that is the reason of reducing. And with the help of item analysis, I'll be able to focus on those limited set of, those set of items which are more focusing on the construct that we are measuring. So here, again, after item analysis, there is a revision of pool 2. And after that, there might be again revisions which are going on. But here in the diagram, we are moving on to the next step, that is validation study, where we are establishing psychometric properties of the test, that is reliability, validity, standardizing it, what are the norms, establishing the norms according to the population. All of that will be the next steps, after which we will be creating the technical manual for public use. Sorry, not public use, for whoever is our intended client population and administrators. So the phases, as we said, within the phases, these are what we saw was the steps, and right now we'll be covering the phases. So first one is instrument purpose and construct measured. The next one is response format that I had told you. These are the various visual and semantic differential. All of that will be covered in the next lecture. The next is item generation. So in item generation, what all will be seen? Number of items, what are the sources from which we are generating these items? Is it from an existing, already existing tool which was made for a different population, or is it from literature review and like that? The next is wording. So if I am asking a certain question, is it more of based on like 5th grade level of reading, or is it more sophisticated? Again, that depends on what is the purpose of your test. Are you measuring the aptitude, or are you is it very some psychological feeling that you're measuring, like that? Next is item evaluation, expert panel review, pilot testing, item analysis, response bias. So all of that we have already covered. Fourth was testing for the psychometric properties of the scale. So that is dimensionality, factor analysis, reliability, validity, etc. Fifth is item response theory, classical test theory, which will be covered later. Sixth is test standardization. So why standardization is necessary is that you are ensuring a uniform form of administration, so that you will be able to feel confident that the score that you have got from the SSC is not because of the changes in the form of administration. So the tool is able to measure the actual construct, and it is not based on the errors, administration error. So just because I have administered to you is very differently from the way another person has administered to you, and that will cause the changes in the score, then it means that the changes in the score could not be because of the variability in the construct that we are measuring, but rather on the changes or the differences in the administration. So to reduce such kind of standard errors or systematic errors in the tool, we standardize a test to ensure a uniform form of uniform administration process. The next is establishing norms. And the last one, as mentioned, test manner. So in the pilot testing, this is a diagram which tries to capture in brief of what happens in pilot testing. So the first one is pre-testing the items to check they are comprehensible, are unambiguous, and ask a single question. This is usually done by, not only by a psychometrician, but at the same time by the subject matter experts. So is it very comprehensive, or are they trying to ask the question?
Again, there is a problem. Kavita.
Yes. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one, pre-testing the items to check, are done by both the psychometrician as well as the subject matter experts to see if they are comprehensible. That is, are you able to ask that question in minimum number of words, or are you trying to stretch the question even if it's not necessary? Second is, are unambiguous, is not able to actually try to elicit a response that measure the construct, or is it very vague? And the last is asking a single question, that is again focused on how my one item will only be measuring one latent variable and not multiple. So that is what it means. The next is discarding or rewriting items which did not meet these criteria and pre-test again. The next is evaluate internal consistency with the scale with item total correlation. So this is what happens in the item analysis after the pilot testing, pilot administration. So with the data that we have gathered in the pilot test, we conduct the item analysis, and through which the first thing we will be seeing is correlating each item with the scale total, omitting that item. So all of this will be further covered in the next lecture, and you'll get a overview. But right now, just to go through the process, have a look into it. The next is eliminating the items based on its Pearson value. That is, if there are internal consistency, if the item is able to actually measure. So it all depends on how reliably and valid is the item able to measure the construct. And rank order the rest and select items starting the highest correlation, like that. Then the next is calculating Cronbach's alpha or KR20, Kuder-Richardson's, then eliminating one item, deleting items that increase alpha significantly, like that. For multiple scale questions, check the item that is in the right scale by doing factor analysis or by eliminating cross-loading items. So all of this will be covered in next lectures. But I felt that if you have this overview, you might not understand it right now, but after the lectures, after the further lectures that cover the factor analysis and everything, you can come back to this PPT, go through this flow diagram, and it will help you gain more clarity to what are the process. So you'll not only have like isolated knowledge on different things, but you'll know why are we studying each topic and where is it used. This is the process of dimensionality. So where you are running the exploratory factor analysis and then confirmatory factor analysis. So why we do that is to see how many factors are there in the scale. So is it unidimensional or it is multidimensional? So if it is multidimensional, then can the factors be explained? So when you're doing the factor analysis, you get to know like a cluster of, all of these items are measuring one factor, but you don't know what that factors are. So that is why the question is, can the factors be explained? So if yes, so by reading the items, if you are able to explain, okay, these items are able to measure a certain factor, then the next question is, are the factors correlated? So if the multidimensional, then if answer is no, then the multidimensional scale is with uncorrelated factors, and if yes, then it is with correlated factors. So like that. If it is no, then it has to be revised to be able to explain the factors. Now moving on to the first phase, which is the most important and the most difficult when you're trying to begin as a psychometrician. So the first phase is on item construction or item writing for generating a item pool. So I'll just read through it. Item writing is often regarded as an art form, but there is a science to the process. The key is to remember the end goal, that the item will focus on a piece of knowledge, which will be skill, ability, or trait, and differentiate between examinees with high and low levels of knowledge.
Kavita, please you allow me to say something.
Yes, sir.
You go to the earlier one. Yes, this is the item construction. So there is a difference between statement and the item. Okay. So when we are using the statement, we are not considering the individual differences. But when we are considering the item, then we are considering the individual differences with respect to the different levels of abilities. Okay.
Yes.
And different levels of the attitudes, etc. So item construction is very vital. And why it is called scientific? Because when you are designing the item, then you have to think, that is whether the item response will be skewed or not. So do you have any idea about the skewed response?
Yes, sir. Yes. In the further guidelines that we are going to be shown now, which is going to be shown now, there is questions about how to not have a skewed response, or if there is necessary, and all of that, how it is dependent on the purpose of test, like that.
Okay. So another thing, that is item should be related to the construct. So what is the construct? Construct means it is the abstraction of the concept. For example, you are assessing the environmental attitude. So you have to define the environmental attitude operationally. Operationally, why? Because it should be measurable. Okay. Therefore, you have to define the construct operationally, number one. Number two, you have to think about the different subconstruct of the construct. So when you think, that is the construct is multidimensional in nature, then you have to think some of the subconstructs which are very much related to the construct, but they are independent in nature. For example, you are interested to assess the personality pattern of the people for your selection. There is a probability that the subconstructs may or may not be related with each other. For example, if you are using the personality test, that is a 5-factor personality test that the Costa and McRae they have done, and we have noted that the 5 factors, they are not correlated with each other. They are independent. Okay. Therefore, we must be very much cautious about designing the item. So the item, number one, item should be very simple, so that there will be no cognitive taxation on the part of the respondent, number one. So how to make the item without any cognitive taxation? The approach is you will not use any technical terms within the item. Next, there will be no ambiguity within the item. Okay. And another thing, that is, item should not be skewed in nature. Okay. So now it is over to Kavita.
Okay. So whatever sir said now, in addition to that, we will be covering the what are the format of what are the guidelines of constructing each item. So before that, I felt the need to more focus on components of a good item writer. So what are the components that you should be focusing on? 1 minute.
Kavita, not audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I now?
Yeah.
Okay. 1 minute. Okay. So the components of a good item writer. So when you start writing any item, these are the few things that you should always recheck with yourself. That is the main aspect called validity. So when you are saying validity, what it means that your item is able to measure the construct that you have in mind. So this is where the main important thing of operational definition comes to play. So when you're operationally defining any variable, it is very important to have clear cut view of what a certain variable means to you and how you will be measuring that variable within your tool. So for example, when you say aggression can mean very different to me or another person. So for me, it will be a 5-year-old child. If the 5-year-old child is engaging in temper tantrums, will it be considered an aggressive act or not? Is very dependent on the on my differences, on how I view it will be very different with another person who is viewing aggression. So this is why it is very necessary to operationally define on what the tool construct the psychometrician has in mind when he or she is trying to measure that variable. So it is very necessary to operationally define the variable in such a way that it will help you gain insight into how you will be able to measure the variable. For example, aggression, then in my operational definition, it will be able to show that according to me, a child being aggressive means he or she is throwing a temper tantrum more than 5 times a day. So like that, after we are developing our operational definition for each variable, it becomes easier to measure that variable by pinpointing certain behaviors or feelings or thoughts, cognitions like that, etc. So when we say validity, so when we are saying validity, it means on how each item is able to actually purportedly measure the construct that we have mind, or is it measuring something else that we do not have under study. So when we need the item to specifically measure what is supposed to be measured, so that is called a construct in psychometric languages. So because then the scores on the test will accordingly reflect the construct and not any unrelated traits or aspects of the testing process. So that is why we told the importance of the test standardization and how the testing process is not affecting the score of the individual in a skewed manner or an unreliable manner. So the next is, this claim is supported by a chain of evidence from score interpretation back to the construct of interest. So in case of professional competency exams, that chain is job analysis, specification, item, score, interpretation. The test development process should revolve around ensuring linkage with the chain and documenting the linkage as much as possible. So like that, when you have, for example, achievement need or achievement motivation as your variable, then adaptability as your as your variable, then within your operational definition and subdomains, you will have these sub constructs that are physical adaptability, emotional adaptability, like that. So according to those subdomains, are the items able to actually measure what you purport to measure? So next is mapping the objective. So this is making the step from test specification to individual items, because the goal of test development is to link the steps as closely as possible. Newly written items must specifically map to the outline of the test. That is, when you're writing an item, you have to always keep rechecking it with the operational definition of the construct that you have written, or with each domain. So when there is PTSD, so in PTSD, there are a lot of flashbacks, panic attacks. So like that, when you're asking each question, is the item actually capturing what my operational definition of flashback is, or is it able to capture what a panic attack is? So if the item is very vague, if you're writing the item very vague, it might end up capturing both, but not with equal precision. So like that, mapping the objective of each item. So what is my item going to measure? That is mapping the objectives. Next is clear as concise. That's what I had also explained, that each statement should be very clear and be able to, by reading the item itself, the psychometrician should be able to understand where does this item belong to. The next is understanding the examining. So this is one minute. So the item writer must fully understand the intended audience of the test. So the item should be appropriately difficult. Should have appropriate difficulty level. So if an item is to differentiate between low and medium examinees, the item writer must conceptualize what constitutes a low and medium examinee. So if we are considering constructing an item that measures honesty, so my item should be able to differentiate between individuals who are honest in nature or who engages in dishonest act. So if the item is not able to differentiate, then it is not fulfilling its process. So that is what it says, that an item and the test format should be able to differentiate between the low and medium examinees. The writer must conceptualize for which that what is honesty. So when I am constructing an item, a tool on integrity and honesty, then my operational definition will not only be restricted to what is honesty, but as well as what is dishonesty, because that is when I am able to see if my item is able to successfully differentiate between low performing individuals as well as the high performing individuals. The next is anticipating scoring. So based on that, how is your scoring based on 0 to 5, or which rating format will it be used, all of that. Next is understanding material. That is, if I want an item to be focused on measuring what is dishonesty, then how will my item look like? At the same time, if I want my item to measure aggression, then how will it look like? So all of this is basing from the theoretical foundation and the literature review that you have conducted, and by operationally defining what is the variable that you are going to measure. The next is recording the reasoning behind the item and the correct response. That is, after you have constructed the item, you have to bring out the rationale. That is, this item is going to measure so and so variable, and the format that we are using. So the test options could be from never to always. So never will be capturing individuals who are having that trait or variable or interest in low. Will be having all of those in low, and while the options that are selected is in always format, then it will be high performing, like that. So these are few of the terminology as a psychometrician you should know, because it is easier to communicate, and while communicating you should be using these terms appropriately. So for which the item, what is called item, is referred to as a test question. So, but in many cases it is not question, and therefore the most general term item is appropriate. So when even while I was talking or while explaining, there was often a question, often a doubt of whether to address a certain item as a question or a statement format. Like that, an item format might vary so much. So a overall collective term that we use is item. So for example, items can be statements with agree or disagree response. Sentence completion can be also called as item. Essays, question, real life performing tasks. So a general colloquial term that we use is item. The next is the stem. So this is the initial part of the item which is presented and which is needed to be answered by the SSE. So for example, in match the following, then whatever sentence completion test, the first sentence that is shown and then there is a blank, then that part is called stem. So like that, whatever the prompts that you're giving is called the stem, and then the response is elicited in response to the stem. The next is prompt and stimulus. So that is, in certain types of assessment, stems often contain a prompt or a stimulus. For example, a stem could contain a reading passage or audio of someone speaking, after which a specific question is presented. So like that, if my prompt is, there was a boy and he likes to play dash. So that is my prompt. So I'm prompting the child as the assessee to able to respond in a manner that will elicit the answer that I'm looking for. The next is the option. So for multiple choice questions, there are a lot of A, B, C like that, which is given. So all of those are called as options. The next is key. Key is the right option. So from multiple choice question, there is always, there's not always, but there's always that one right answer. So that right answer is called as the correct option, which is called as key. And the rest of the options which are not the key are called as distractors, the incorrect options. The next we have is the response. So response is the response of the examinee in any item. So multiple response question, multiple choice question, all of that, whatever the examinee is responding to is called as response. The next is rubric. Rubric is a clearly defined set of criteria for scoring an item set to scale of numbers. So it attempts to relate student responses and open response items to the standards and content of the test, providing a framework with which to evaluate responses. So in rating scale or in Likert items, there will be options like never, sometimes, always, like that. So if I am giving it certain set of scoring, then it will be 0, 1, 2. So all of this, setting a set of criteria for scoring, is called as rubric. So now we are going on to the main part, which is item construction guidelines. How to, now that we know what are the things that we have to keep in mind while constructing an item, and what are, as a item writer, what are the things that you should always keep on rechecking, and what are the terminology. Now moving on to how to start writing an item. So based on the operational definition, based on the literature review, based on the theoretical foundation, now that if you have chosen a certain kind of test format, that will be covered by Priya. After that, these are the few guidelines that you have to keep in mind. So the first thing that we'll be covering is the general guidelines for all kind of test format, after which we'll be looking through how is it different for MCQ, how is it different for oral exams, how is it different for true or false, like that. So these are the general guidelines. So the first thing that we have to keep in mind is that do not use trick items. That is, the items that are tricky either intentionally or accidentally. So when you say trick items, why is it said that you shouldn't use trick items? Because it is very unfair to the examinee. That is, even though the examinee knows the correct answer, just because the item is tricky, he or she might end up giving the wrong answer. So here it is unfair to the examiner because he or she has the knowledge of that response, of how to respond to that item. Yet, just because the item is worded in a tricky manner, the examinee is responding incorrectly. So this threatens the validity of the test because it is not able to correctly measure the variable or measure the variable under study. It is not able to capture or capture the true score of the SSE. The next is tricky items measure test taking skills more than the intended construct. That is, it is not able to, it is when you are wording any item trickily, it is about whether that SSE is able to figure out that it is a tricky item. So it is more on the basis of the test taking skills than measuring the construct. The next is trick items heighten test anxiety and cause examinees to mistrust the intent of all other items. So once I get the tricky items, the next item, even if it is not tricky, if it is not intentionally made to be tricky, the examiner might feel that it is a tricky question and might end up giving the wrong answer. At the same time, it threatens the validity of the test. Having the tricky items also increase the anxiety of the examinee, which might end up forcing them to make more errors. So the cause of unintentional trickiness is that there is discrimination between two options is too fine. So when the options in the MCQ question, there are two options that are almost similar, then it acts as a tricky item. If it is not focusing on the trivial content, the options, then again it acts as a tricky items. If there are overlapping options, that is, for example, how to give, if there is in one option itself, it talks about A and B, in another it talks about B and C, then again there are overlapping options, and like that it will be very confusing. The next is irrelevant content. It talks by itself. The second is single answer allowed, but multiple correct answers are also possible. So when it is multiple choice question, it can be in if there is one single answer or double correct answer. So having this optional itself might confuse the SSE. That is, when I'm writing an answer, I know this is the correct answer, but the question instruction also says that there might be multiple correct answers. So just because I think that there might be multiple correct answer, even though I'm not sure, I might end up ticking on the another distractor options. And next is ambiguity in either the stem or the option. That is not, there is no clarity, or there is vague. The answer is very vague and not on to the point. So when there is an option like that, even then the SSE will be motivated to choose an option which is not actually measuring their knowledge, skill, or aptitude. The second thing, after having do not use the trick item, second is measuring a single construct. So if an examinee incorrectly answers an item that has multiple constructs, it is impossible to know which construct is not mastered. So if, for example, how we were talking about how there is a question which not only tries to evaluate your mathematical skill, but also on, it is worded with very difficult jargon words. So the same item plans to measure both mathematical skills as well as linguistic skill. But if I'm correctly answering to it, or if I'm wrongly answering to it, what does it mean? As an SSE who wrongly answered to it, does it mean that I have poor mathematical skills or linguistic skill? What does it mean? So when a item is measuring multiple construct, if I gain right in it, what does that mean? If I have better linguistic skill, or do I have mathematical skill? So it is very impossible to know on which construct have I mastered or not mastered. So always make sure that each item is only focusing on single construct. The items are generally scored dichotomously, so the only inference that can be made is that the examinee knows the entire item or none of the item. So as we said, either the person is very fluent in linguistics in their vocabulary, or they are good in their mathematical skills. Like that, it is yes or no, and it is scored dichotomously. So having a any item that measures multiple construct, it can be very misleading. Compound items heighten text anxiety and lower the perceived validity of the exam. So while I'm answering the same item which tries to measure both mathematical as well as the linguistic skills, just because I am not fluent in linguistic skill, I might feel very less confident in solving the questions that try to capture mathematical skills as well. So having that kind of low self-efficacy at that moment will try to heighten your text anxiety, and that way the SSC might not be able to, might end up making errors in even questions that are actually only measuring the mathematical skills. So here the main problem of the wrong item, which is measuring multiple construct, has influenced the way the SSC is able to measure, respond to other questions as well. The next is avoid opinion-based items. That is, never ask what would you do or use or try. The examinee's answer can never be wrong. So the problem is you are leading. So when you say opinion-based items, then you're leading the responder to respond in a certain way. So what would you do, or what would you use, or what would you try if this is the situation? What if the answer is I wouldn't try if the situation is like that? So if for example, what would you do if a tiger jumps right in front of you? Or what would you try to do like that? What if my answer is I would do nothing, I would just stand there? So when you are asking what would you do, it is very misleading, because you are forcing that responder to respond in certain way. So if there are no options that the responder wants to respond to, then he or she might think in a different way, which is not how the responder is actually wanting to think. Next is use caution when asking for the best thing or the best way of doing something, unless it is clearly the best among the option. So what best thing for me might be different from another person's best thing. That is, how do I, what is the best way of dealing with boredom? So for a person who is productive, he or she might say, someone who is very obsessed with having a healthy lifestyle will be saying going working out. The another person might say sleeping or like that. So the best thing for it will differ from one individual to another, and the correct option that you are actually thinking might be very different. So when you say best thing, it becomes a more on what the individual's opinion of the best thing is, rather than what is actually the best thing in the context. So if differences exist between any expert opinions about what the best is, then avoid using it. So that is what, if there is a individual differences in the item, in the way an individual might respond to what the best thing is, then avoid using that item. Qualify the standard according to so and so, or according to clinician's point of view. What do you think? What is the best thing or best way to deal with addiction? So like that. So when you're using the question, the word the best, then also try to say that in according to what. So that way you're trying to say that it is not according to you, so it is not able to misjudge the item. Avoid absolute modifiers such as always, never, only, and none. So the use of absolute modifiers in option makes it easy to eliminate options, increasing the guessing probability. So that is what if while I'm answering, the question is, are you an irritated person? So there need to be options like sometimes or less frequent than ever, like that. So when it is always and never, what if my answer is in between and it's not always or neither it is never? So if it is only little, if I feel that I'm a very irritated person, very little, but I don't have any option, I only have two options, always and never, then I might end up choosing the never option. But that is not clearly measuring the construct that we are studying. So that way. Avoid absolute modifiers, and even when you are using always and never in the extreme ends, make sure there are other options that are available. Avoid excessive verbiage. So that is wording items take longer to read. So as sir was saying, there is a lot of cognitive resource that are in demand when you are answering a lot of hundreds and 150 of question. Similarly, if an item is a very long item, the statement itself, then I might experience fatigue in not only responding to 100 questions, but only in 30 questions, because it is worded in a very long format. Next is avoid over specific or over general content. That is tends to be when over specific content, then it tends to be very trivial, and over general content tends to be very ambiguous, which is very vague. Use novel content. Do not repeat the exact wording from training materials. Repeated wordings tend to test recall and recognition rather than learning. So this is for aptitude test or knowledge test. So if after this lecture, I end up giving you a question and I use the exact words that are used in the PPT, then it is more about how you're able to recall and recognize what is the correct option, rather than if I asked it in a very application format and different words are used from the training material itself. So that will help me understand if you as a SSC have understood the material that was taught to you, or is it just based on the recall or the recognition. Next is keep the items independent. That is, content should be independent from item to item. Do not give the answer away to one item in the stem of another, like that. So don't make answering one item correctly dependent on knowing the correct answer to another item. So this is mainly, you can see it in a knowledge or a aptitude test, where there is one item that, how to explain? Okay. If there is a crime scene that is being asked of, and you are able, your task is to find the criminal. So that was one question. What if you're not able to find who's the criminal is? And the next question is, what do you think the criminal, why did the criminal behave in such a way? So if you are not able to find the criminal in first place, then how can you answer the next question to why the criminal behaved in a certain manner? So that is, don't make answering one item correctly dependent on knowing the correct answer to the another item. Similarly, don't give the answer away to one item in the stem of the another. So when I ask what is the capital of Maharashtra, and the next question, Mumbai being the capital of Maharashtra, this was the what do you think was the calamity faced at that time? So you are already answering the item question that have been previously asked. And then the next is the most important one: write items to a 6th grade reading level. Until and unless your test is trying to measure the vocabulary skills or the linguistic skills, then you should refrain from using very sophisticated words or jargon words or terminology, because using appropriate vocabulary for construct is very necessary. So when you say 6th grade reading level, here in your tool is trying to only assess or measure the construct under study, and not trying to look at the linguistic skills of the individual. So a minimum 6th grade reading level is enough. So for example, how do you spend a lot of time thinking and worrying about a situation? So this is a very quite forward question that is being asked. But if I want to use sophisticated words, then do you often find yourself ruminating? What if the word meaning of the word ruminating is not known to many people, especially in India, where the first language itself is not English? Not everybody is comfortable or neither thorough with the language itself. So write items to a 6th grade reading level. Next is do not teach. That is, the purpose of certification is to verify knowledge. Do not introduce new material nor reinforce material the examinee should already know. So that is in terms of having a, I have, after this lecture, if I'm asking a question that was not even covered in the lecture itself, then it wouldn't be fair to you when I'm assessing how much you have understood in the lecture or not, because when I'm not covered, this shouldn't be the way of measuring how much you have learned or not. It is more about introducing a new material or teaching a new material. Then the purpose of the whole test has been changed from whether seeing you have understood the material to trying to introduce a new material. So now that we have covered the general guidelines for writing any kind of items, we will be more focusing on how to write an item for MCQ types of tests, that is multiple choice question, for matching, for true or false, for essay test, for short answer test, and oral exams. So for multiple choice test, the general item writing procedural is use either the best answer or the correct answer format. And second, avoid the complex multiple choice question. So this, like, is the answer A or is the answer B or is the answer A and D or A and C, like that. Avoid complex multiple choice question, because it might not measure how much you know about the topic, but also it becomes tricky and about whether you have given certain enough focus on each options or not. But at the same time, when there are competitive exams like NET or NET or GATE, then these type of questions are introduced because we do want that kind of analyzing and observation skills, which is necessary. The next third one is format the item vertically and not horizontally. That is, in terms of, this was based on various research studies which says that formatting the item vertically has its own benefit of being able to eliminate if it is the right response or not when compared to when it is horizontally placed. Next is allow time for editing and other types of item revisions. This is to make sure that there are no two items that in one way or the another act as the key items. Next is use good grammar, punctuation, and spelling consistency. Sixth one, minimize examinee reading time in phrasing each item. Seventh is avoid tricky items, those which mislead or deceive examinees into answering incorrectly. So this is in the procedural way of general item writing. The next is about the content, the concerns about the content. Base each item on an educational or instructional objective. Ninth one, focus on one single problem at a time. 10th, keep the vocabulary consistent with examinee's level of understanding. So that is what we had mentioned about the jargon. Then, 1 minute. Give me 1 minute. My laptop is running low. Okay, sorry for that. Keeping the vocabulary consistent with examinee's level of understanding. 11th one, avoid queuing one item with another. Keep items independent of one another. 12th is use the author's examples as a basis for developing your items. Third one, avoid over specific knowledge when developing the item. That is, when you have any item, then having over specific knowledge, that is when, what if you are trying to measure how much you know about psychometry. So if I am literally going in depth about what is the meaning of one section's whole one format or one term, then it is not measuring how much I know about psychometry, but also it measures on how much I've read about the overall thing. So maybe I am fluent in how to develop a tool and not thorough with the theories like that. So having very over specific knowledge, avoid having over specific knowledge when developing the item. Next is avoid textbook verbatim phrasing when developing the item, as previously explained. Avoid item based on opinions. 16th is use multiple choice to measure higher level of thinking. 17 is test for important or significant material. So this is for multiple choice question. So in multiple choice, okay. Multiple choice question, this was the general thing that we have already covered. Now, only focusing on the construction of the stem. What was the stem? That is before the response, the statement or the question, that is prompt that has been asked. So the thing, the guideline while writing the constructing the stem is state the stem in question form or completion form. So according to recent research, it says that the question format is more favored other than the completion format. So when I'm asking question format, that is how have you been feeling in the past 2 weeks, is a question format. But if I ask in a completion format, that is I have been feeling dash since past 2 weeks I have been feeling dash. So according to recent research, it is said that if you write that the response, it is a tool is more psychometrically sound if it is in question format other than the completion format. So if you are able to do it in certain manner, then do it. But if the purpose of your test intends or wants you to have it in a completion format, then choose that. 19th is when using the completion format, do not leave a blank for completion in the beginning or the middle of the stem of the question. That is, if it is in the beginning or in the end, the stem is in the beginning or in the, when the blank is in the beginning or the middle, then you can naturally observe that the question or the stem is in a very leading format and not actually asking a question. So for example, in our Joseph Sachs sentence completion test, you can see all the blanks are in the end of the step. So when I say my father dash, then there is a wide range of responses that I can give. But if the question is that I feel dash towards my father, then there is a very restrictive responses or a limited number of response that a individual is able to give. So I will only be able to understand how the individual feels, what are the feelings that the individual have towards the father. But in the first question, that my father dash, there is a lot of other things that I can understand. And being a projective test, it might also help in understanding the deviant behavior from the individual when the questions are not very specific or very leading. Next is ensure that the direction in the stem are clear and that wording lets the examinee know exactly what is being asked. So how have you been feeling? I have been feeling dash is a very vague. So what it does it mean today or the whole day, or does it mean the whole week, like that? So the wording lets the examinee know exactly what is being asked. So when I say at the end of the day after work, I have been feeling dash, then it means that I want to know at the end of the day, due to the effect of the work, how I have been feeling, like that. Next is avoid window dressing, that is using extra words or sophisticated words in the stem even when it is not necessary. So always make sure in minimum number of words, even while writing literature review or any kind of research format, research, then make sure that you are able to explain any concept in minimum number of words. Next is 22, that is word the stem positively, avoid negative phrasing, because sometimes it happens that when there are two no words, negative words, that is, I do not often feel not that sad, or I often, so like that, when there are negative phrasing, it is more cognitively demanding and it might end up being very much confusing. Next is include the central idea and most of the phrasing in the stem. So when I say my mother usually dash, then the central idea is to know about your relationship with your mother, and that is the word that is the main focus of the stem itself. Now the main thing, distracted development. So when I say main thing, why did I say main thing? Is because from the options that you're giving in the MCQ question itself, it is necessary that the distractor is equally playing the role as distracted. Otherwise, the correct item is very much evident. So there are sometimes answer to the questions which, even if the individual doesn't know which is the right answer, we just know that these cannot be the right answer, and that way I'll end up ticking the right answer. So here the test is item is not able to actually measure how much knowledge I have about something, but it is about my deduction skills or test taking skills. So it is very important on the quality of the distractor that you are also introducing. Distractor, let me again remind you, are all those options which are not the key answer, which are not the correct answer. So all the incorrect options are called as distractor. So for distractor, the next way of developing the next guideline for developing is use plausible distractors and avoid illogical distractors. That is, plausible is that it can be the right answer. So like that, the distractor should be able to distract and not be very obvious. Next is incorporate common errors of students in distractor. So while giving MCQ question, you can see that the SSCs are may, even the high performing individuals might choose one of this distractor or have chosen this incorrect option. So using that incorrect option as a distractor will be more efficient. Next is avoid technically phrased distractors. That is just on the basis of technical skills that we have used, the distractor might be seen as the right one. So for example, I cannot come with an example right now, but I'll get back to you. The next one is use familiar yet incorrect phrases as distractor. So that is, when you say familiar, that is, for example, Piaget's stages of development. So in that, we know the stages are trust versus mistrust, like that. So one of the distractor could also be in a format which is similar to not only the words of the stages, but instead of trust, I can say faith versus integrity or something like that. So using words which are similar to the correct answer, but at the same time, the meaning is right, but not the word that was actually used by Piaget. So this is what it means. Use familiar yet incorrect phrases. The same can be used. I told you that I'll get back to it. Avoid technical phrase distractors. So if instead of that option in Piaget, when I say in Piaget, there is another stage that is stagnation versus integrity. So what if instead of stagnation, I have one key option as the stagnation versus integrity. At the same time, in another option, instead of using the word stagnation, I have used some similar, but the meaning is same to the stagnation. So that similar, vocabulary similar word versus integrity. So here you're confusing the SSC from being able to answer correctly because both of them mean the same. So are we going with the Piaget's exact word, or are we going with the what it means to say? So here the examinee might be confused. So do not use the technically phrased distractors. Next is avoid the use of humor when developing options. Recent research suggests benefits of humor properly inserted into exam, yet more research is necessary. So in some of the questions, in NET question, when A is equal to B, B is equal to C, C is equal to D, A is equal to B. So in questions like these, sometimes there are funny, like the crow is black, can any of you come up with a example for this, avoiding the use of humor when developing the options? Hello? Iti, Yashwati, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm thinking.
Have you come across any instances where you were, while answering, they were humor that was used. So sometimes very obvious things like, I'm not able to come up with a direct example, but yeah, I'll get back to you.
Not the exams, but I have read some humor in theory.
Could you share
Like,
that?
like in biological psychology, when we read about the limbic system, there is this popular humor, the 4 Fs, about fighting, fleeing, feeding, and the fourth F, So
Right,
it's
right,
like that. Yeah,
right,
so that humor is very popular in biological psychology.
right,
That
right,
I've heard many times.
right. So in the same example, we know there is something called 4 Fs. So if there was something other word that starts with the letter F, but we definitely know. So if there is something called funny as one of the option, then we know we definitely it is not right. But at the same time, we are laughing at the how bad of a option or a distractor it was.
Yes.
That is what it means by avoid the use of humor. Thank you. Thank you, Iti. Okay, moving on to the next one. Okay. So this is about the general option development, that is the distractor development, and also about the correct option development, that is the keyword development. So in general option development, use as many options that are feasible, more options are desirable. So when you say feasible, that is that it is almost like the correct answer and not very obviously the wrong answer. According to recent research, it is said that it is good to have at least 4 to 5 options rather than 3 or more than uh, 5 or 6 or like that. The whatever is decided is the 4 to 5 option. Next is place options in a logical or numerical order. And next is keep options independent. Options should not be overlapping. Keep all options in an item homogeneous in content. So when you homogeneous, that is similar to the content that you are. So according to what Iti had said, if I had written funny, it is way, it does not include into the what the whole topic is regarding. So when I am saying dash is the king of the fruit, so we know the answer is mango. So there we will be writing the options could be apple, grapes, and so and so. But there, if I add a vegetable, then the options are not. It is a very obvious distractor. So keep all options in an item homogeneous in content. So keep them all fruits itself. Keep the length of the option fairly consistent. That is also very necessary. Do not make it too small or big, as the cognitive demand and the resources also differ. Avoid or use sparingly the phrases all of the above or none of the above sparingly. Avoid the use of phrase I don't know. Phrase options positively and not negatively. So when I say not orange or not grapes, so that is all not necessary. Introduce options that are positive in nature. Avoid distractors that can clue test-wise examinees. For example, avoid clang association, absurd options, formal prompts, or semantic, overly specific or overly general cues. When in terms of semantic is also same. So when I'm saying trust versus mistrust like that, so it shouldn't be, neither should be more specific or nor overly general. Avoid giving clues through the use of faulty grammatical constructions. Avoid specific determinants such as never and always. So when you say avoid giving clues through the use of faulty grammatical construction, is that in the same example that we can take trust versus mistrust, we know that all of the stages of the Piaget comes with one word versus the another. So if there are options that say dash and dash, then we know for definite that that is not the option. So avoid giving clues through the use of faulty grammatical construction. So now developing about the correct option, the key answer. Position the correct option so that it appears above the same number of times each possible position for a set of items. So this has happened multiple times that in true or false question, either it is always true or false. So when children don't know how to answer or what is the answer to a certain question, they might end up answering all of it true or all of it false, like that. So for multiple choice question, it will be all the A's or all the B, or A, B, C, C, B, A, like that. So if there is a certain pattern within our within our tool, then the individual who is answering it through luck would have understood that there is a certain pattern and would be able to respond, not because he or she has knowledge of the items that are being asked, of the questions that are being asked, but rather he or she is able to understand what are the patterns that we have used. So position the correct option so that it appears randomly. So if the right answer is B in one, then in another it should be D. So make sure there is no such pattern that is being observed. Next is make sure there is only one and only one correct option. So that is the main focus. So that was about all the MCQ question. Next is matching items. So use only homogeneous subject matter. So use only homogeneous subject matter, that is within the matching items, make sure all the options itself also has the, if for example, if you're talking about psychometry, then from each unit, I might ask one of the concept, and the answer is all options are also all about the same units. So that way it is covering the homogeneous subject matter. Do not have the same number of items and options. So this, why is this important? Can any of you explain to me why is it important of not having the same number of items and options? Yashwati? Iti? Are you both thinking or are you there? Okay, let me continue. Did anyone unmute now? Okay,
Ma'am, actually, what the statement does mean, I don't understand.
Okay, do not have the same number of items and options. That is, when I have 5 items, 5 matching words. So when I say, what can be the questions in a matching item? So when the capitals and the state. So when I have 5 capitals and I have to match them with the state of that capital of that state, then I might have also 5 options. So if there are 5 items and 5 options, then it is easy for me to connect them both. So by doing that, if there are 5 items and I only know answer of 3 or 4, then even though I don't know the 5th state's capital, I'll be able to figure it out because there are only 5 options. So if I'm able to figure out the 4 correct answers, then whatever is left becomes the correct answer for the 5th option. So that is why you shouldn't have the same number of items, and the number of options should be more, so that the SSC is not able to figure out just by the method of deduction and elimination. Do you understand? Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next is arrange the list of responses in a logical order. Next is keep the list of items brief. Always place the entire task on the same page. That is the options as well as the questions that are being asked, and the correct answer of it also should be on the same page itself. If it is going on to the next page, then make sure that it has a subsection and the options of those questions that are being asked in the first page is itself there in the first page itself. For next is for the true and false items. Avoid statements that are too general. Next is do not use negative or double negatives. Double negatives is like, I do not know what is not the capital of the so and so, like that. Double negation means I know, when I say I do not know what is not the capital of so and so, I am saying that I know. So do not use double negatives. Do not use long or complex sentences, that is with ands and buts and everything. Directly ask the question. Do not include more than one idea. So if I'm saying that so and so is the effect of Charles' evolution, but this is not the effect of so and so theory. So there are introduction of two theories that are together. So like that, do not include more than one idea. Next is, if you're using an opinion, indicate the source. So that is according to. So when the true or false question is about a critical review. So according to an author's name, Bride et al., the trauma scale tool is not a reliable and a valid tool. So this is not about how you feel if it is a reliable or a valid tool, but according to certain critical. So like that, if you're using an opinion, indicate the source according to so and so person. Next is, true or false statement should be the same length. So that is when the statement for true or false. So it shouldn't be able to be deducted on which statements could be true and which statements could be false. All the statements should be moreover the same length. Next is, include the same number of true and false statements. It should be not like the child or whatever, the individual being able to figure out all the answers are false or all the answers are true, or is it like true, false, or like that. Because we often end up doing that when we do not know the answer, hoping that some or the other might be right. So in order to reduce like that, just by answer from correct response from random guessing, we have to introduce the same number of true and false without any patterns. Do not use specific qualifiers such as always or never or all or none or usually. So for example, individuals with major depressive disorder always commit suicide or never commit suicide, like that. All the individuals who are suffering from major depressive disorder try committing once or twice, like that. So do not use specific qualifiers. Next is essay type question. So in essay type question, frame questions so that the examinee's task is explicitly defined. That is, by reading the question itself, the examinee will know on what should I be writing about. So if I'm just saying, talk about the behavioral approach of psychology, then it is such a vast topic, and what all to cover will not be specific like that. Next is, specify the value and an approximate time limit for each question. That is, if I see that the behavioral approach question, same question is for only 5 marks, then I have to write only 1 page or 1 paragraph. So I will only be mentioning all the behavioral theories under that. But at the same time, if it is for 15 to 20 marks, then I have to write 4 to 5 pages on to it. And having that, knowing the value of each question will help me determine how much I should elaborate or confine. Next is, employ a large number of questions that require relatively short answers. So this is why this is necessary is that if I am trying to assess your knowledge in psychometry, then having multiple questions from each unit will help me understand if you have gathered the knowledge from each unit, or if I end up asking only one question from one unit, it might be that you have prepared that one unit itself only, and you have the knowledge about one unit only, yet the test is trying to measure your psychometry, the whole knowledge about psychometry. So employing a large number of questions that require relatively short answer is able to gather a assessment of your complete knowledge in a topic rather than one or not few. Do not employ optional questions. So this is also again that you can see during exams. When you give A or B, B or C or something, the children or the SSC might, it also shows how the individual might not know or might have not prepared one thing. So when all the questions are compulsory, you know if the SSC has certain knowledge or not. When there is option, you're not sure if that option was chosen because of the lack of knowledge or because of writing skills. Verify a question's quality by writing a trial response to the question. So verify a question's quality by writing a trial response to the question. Okay, right. So this is when in instructions and sample you give like a model answer to it, so that the response SSE knows in what characteristics or in what way should he or she be answered. Next is prepare a tentative scoring key in advance of considering the examinee response. So in mainly in essay type questions, you as a scorer will have certain keywords that you're looking for. When I say behavioral approach, then I want the 4 theories to be covered. So I'll be looking for Skinner's or Pavlov's, like that. There'll be certain tentative scoring key that I already have in mind while scoring the essay that you have written, that I need to see all of these keywords to give you the full mark. Next is score all answers to one question before scoring the next question. Score all answers to one question before scoring the next question. That is not skipping, and that way having a overall gathering the overall knowledge about certain thing. Making prior decisions regarding treatment of such factors and spelling and punctuation. So often in exams that are more focused on the English and linguistic skills, language skills, like for example, if the exam is about your Hindi or English, then the punctuation and the spellings is of equal importance of how much your vocabulary has developed. But at the same time, it is a psychology exams, then the focus is on how much you are a expert or how much you have mastered the field rather than the language skills. Next is evaluate essay responses anonymously. That is to avoid the to avoid the biases. If I know that a certain student, it is the scoring sheet that I have in my hand is of a certain student, then I might be biased to rate him less or no according to their performance in the class. So like that. Short answer and oral exams. In oral exam, prepare a list of questions that will be used with all the students. Have at least 2 people evaluate the student. Next is video or audio tape the responses. So having a prepared list of questions is that you will be able to make sure that you ask questions from general, covering all the important parts of the topic rather than being stuck to one of the unit, because that is not clearly measuring an individual's interest or aptitude or their attitude about something. So when I am assessing the attitude of an individual's belief system or religious belief or practices, then it should be covering all of the aspects and not only their one. When I'm assessing the beliefs as well as the practices, my questions should not be restricted only to the practices that they use. Have at least 2 people evaluate this student. Can any of you explain to me why 2 people that we should have at least 2 people?
Ma'am, for fair assessment, to avoid the bias, personal bias.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. So the next is video and audio taping responses. Again, is to make sure that we have a proof, and if we have missed out on something, especially with children with autism or like that, then we need to, if having a video or audio tape, then at the moment you might only be focusing on the answers that they're giving and might miss up on a lot of non-behavioral aspects of the whole examination, which can be considered later when you have a audio or audio tape responses. The next and the last is the short answer items. So the guidelines for which is a direct question is generally preferable to an incomplete sentence. So like for example, can any of you give me an example? Short answer items, which is where I expect you to answer in few sentences and not in paragraph format. Even when it is in paragraph format, only one paragraph and not more than that. So there, a direct question is generally preferable to an incomplete sentences. So not having blank statements, but rather a question in itself, again, which is specific to some topic. Next is structuring an item so that the required response is concise. concise, and that's what I said, amount specific and general. Next is for incomplete statement types, restrict the number of blanks to almost one or at most two. So this is the filling the blanks questions that we are talking about. For incomplete statement types, restrict the number of blanks to one or at most two. So when you have multiple answers, multiple blanks in the filling the blank question, the examinee would not be able to even figure out what the statement is talking about. So that is where you have to have at most only two blanks at the time. Place the blank near the end of an incomplete sentence or in the margin for a direct question. Next is blanks for answer should be equal in length. And the last one is provide sufficient answer space. That is when there is only, even while providing answer space, make sure it is equal in format, because when there is small or there is a big space, then the individual will be able to deduce if the answer is two-worded or one-worded, like that. And there should be equal in, the blanks for answer should therefore be equal in length and should have sufficient answer space. If there is not sufficient answer space, the examinee might feel that their answer itself is wrong because it's not fitting in the space. That's all for how to construct a test item. Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Has Priya joined? Let me see. Okay. So have any of you tried going through the literature review and have an attempt at starting with a literature review?
No, ma'am, I haven't started yet.
Okay, which is the topic you chose?
Integrity and honesty.
Okay. Please try to start and then make sure that you come up with questions and doubts. That way we will be able to guide more if necessary. Same applies to Yashwati as well.
Ma'am, can we work on our own variables too?
What variables do you have in mind?
Ma'am, my topic is unclothed cognition. So the same is variable.
Right. I'll ask sir and get back to you regarding that.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
We are limited. Yeah. Currently,
Hello,
we are
sir?
limited these three.
So you're not
Currently-
audible.
Currently, we are limited. Hello.
You're not audible clearly, sir.
Oh God. Hello.
Yeah. Now you are.
No, we are basically limited to these three variables already. Already we have discussed these three variables. So what is important, that is they have to define first.
Right.
Okay. So you can tell them, that is, please you submit the definition of the variables. Okay, from the literature. From the literature, they can get the definition of these three variables.
Right.
And based upon that, we can make the literature review later on.
Okay.
So this is the initial task.
So the first task is to come up with the operational definition of the variables that are given to you.
Okay.
That is important.
Yeah, because this variable is not only introduced to you for a literature review. We'll be focusing on constructing the item on the same variable, pilot testing, and henceforth every practical that will be given to you after the end of each lecture will be focused on the same variable. Only while practicing the statistic and the statistical software will a new instrument will be given to you for the practice. But the main, again, when you're conducting the statistical analysis on your own data, it will be the same variable. Is it clear? Is everything clear?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So I think we can conclude for today. And Priya will be in next lecture. Priya will be covering the next part of the syllabus. I'll be uploading the syllabus today so that you can go through it of what are the next topics that will be covered. You can have a slight read through too to understand it more in depth, to have more questions to ask like that. Okay. So can we conclude for today?
Yeah. So, dear students, you have understood what Madam has discussed?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there is no question, right, to you? So what topics Madam has discussed today? Iti?
So we have discussed about the test construction, how to construct the items in a test, and how to go about it, how to phrase the statements or items, and what is the difference between a statement and items. And yes, sir. The do's and don'ts related to item construction.
Wow, very good. So please close your hands for the conclusion prayer.
Yes.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, thank you everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
See you all on next Saturday.
Hello, Kavita.
Yes, sir.
We have to sit together, na? At what time we can sit together?
We can we'll discuss in the group, sir. I think Priya would also be joining after a while.
Okay, okay.
Okay, sir.
Then it is fine. So please you inform me, huh?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.